Yeah, so I obviously went to the conference, BASB conference in LA. Came back at the beginning of the week, and I shared a video about it. I don't know whether you saw my video about it.
I saw a little bit of it. I didn't get to watch the whole thing because I wanted to watch it because I was like, yes, everything's expensive. Yes, everything sucks. Yes, it's weird.
Have you been to LA? No. Okay.
No, but I went to Portland and there was always more things being at it. I think it's an American thing
Hmm.
uh, in general. So I've been to America. It is weird in comparison to what we have. The price is the price, what we read.
Yep.
Whereas that is not the case in America.
No, no, but the summit itself was there were pros and cons, of course, for those that haven't watched the video, bit of context. When I went, I was expecting talking, questions, conversations, but there was much more presentations than conversations, which wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it meant that I didn't really pay attention to the presentations. And there was a presentation on Notebook LM. The man in charge of Google was actually there and did the presentation, but I didn't I didn't listen to the presentation because I was talking to Mike Vardy instead. Um, so the 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 product, the selling of the product, the ideas about the stuff, I didn't really follow. And AI in itself isn't something that I've really liked. I've been fairly open about that with you and just everyone. I just don't like it. Every time I try and use it, it oversimplifies things. It just gets things wrong, and I just haven't liked it. The biggest takeaway I took from the summit about AI was that you need to train AI like an intern. I was like, okay, makes sense. My issue is that I haven't found an AI yet that can really be trained over like a month of interaction. It's sort of like you have to give it information and then just give it more information and more information. And I feel like I'm giving it like loads and loads and loads and loads of sources. It still gets stuff wrong, and then I have to educate it more and more. But how do I get the education of the right things and wrong things to say without just giving it more sources? Um, and the more I'm realizing, the more I'm learning, the more I'm realizing that that essentially is what you got to do with AI. You just got to keep giving it tons and tons of sources that you want, which in the short term isn't helpful in the
No.
slightest. And I think in the medium term, if you don't really know what the right and wrong answers are, or the more effective or ineffective answers are, you don't really know how to educate the intern because you're asking for the answers. So it's almost like you need to have a high level of expertise in the topic to help the AI to help you.
I think that is my assessment as well. It's once you know what you want to do and you just want to make it minutely easier, which is the idea, but it never really is easier. It's still such a new technology. It's still not quite baked yet, no matter how good things have got. And it's got much better, and I think that's what people are holding on to all over the internet. Like, it's so much better now. It's amazing. It's outstanding. It's fine. It's fine. It's functional, and it has a walnut-sized brain that you can fill, and then you need to do more.
A brain. You'd say AI has a brain?
No, I had say it's have storage, which is what which is commonly referred to as a brain, even though it's not. But that's
Yeah.
beside the point.
Get your cog psych out of here. So it's interesting. I actually watched a video by Thomas Nicholas, on YouTube about AI fraud and copy and all the rest of it, and it matches up with this conversation where AI doesn't. It's not its own thing. AI isn't unique. AI isn't different. AI is just a lot of source data copied from other people and regurgitated as something new, which you could argue is what people do. Because at the end of the day, people take their own experiences, AI's experiences as previous data, humans' experiences is their lived experiences, and I would argue experiences before birth, because that's what ecological psychology believes. But we put all of that and then we regurgitate it, we adjust it to our own explanations, AI adjusting it to its own explanations. However, I think that the process or processes of using the information in the variable context, because AI doesn't directly perceive the situation, it doesn't have previous experiences of interacting within the world, it's lacking a lot of context and a lot of information because the organism environment relationship doesn't exist because AI is not an organism. so
Pretty much.
so AI is just, hey, here's stuff. You're like, yeah, but that's not relevant because it doesn't relate. The communication is lost, the synergy is lost, whatever words you want to put there is lost.
And you end up finding yourself coaching the AI tool into giving you the answers you want, which by the time you do that, you're like, okay, well, I just write it myself.
Exactly. And Notebook LM is something I've played with. And actually, I haven't mentioned this. The audio output that it gives. I was playing with this yesterday, and I now have 8 podcast episodes up on a podcast because I figured it'd be easier to do it that way to share it than to just share tons of links to LM files. It's like I'll just download the audio and put it up as a podcast. And I gave it my scripts, and it generated some like 10-minute roughly audio conversation things with the male and female generic voices. I assume that's what they went for. It was more of a feminine voice and a masculine voice, but how you how they decided that and how they shifted the conversation, like the masculine sounding voice does more of the explanations, but the conversation doesn't really work either because like say for example with if you listen to the conversation, I share my story but neither of them, those entities, are me, and it starts off as the feminine voice acting as me as the character, but then the masculine voice is then me as the character, and they just say you, and it's referencing you as a third entity that sort of exists as a source person, but it's not. And the conversation becomes very confusing. um, and not to mention, it just completely oversimplifies a lot of ecological psychology. It doesn't, don't get me wrong. It says some really cool stuff. It says some really nice stuff, but it also completely misunderstands what it is that I'm talking about. So it's, yeah, yeah. Notebook LM is cool, but it's got a long way to go.
I mean, that's just AI in general, and also I think we've got a long way to go to actually see the affordances we have with the tools. Because often I see everybody, if we look in the business world, it's like, oh, it can write content for me. Yeah, it'll write shit content for you. And the way that my use of AI these days is just to fix small bits of information, rewrite stuff when I need to tweak what is said to have a different tone of voice. Like a lot of my usage now is just very small, very finite, very constrained things. And when you use it like that, it works really well. It needs to be used in a highly constrained environment so that its main focus is one thing. It's just doing a thing, whether that be rewriting an email to be clearer, or whether it be remove the snark from the email that I wrote, like whatever it might be. It's been a rough week. No matter what it may be, like that's how it's used and how I found it most valuable. Could I do it myself? Yes, but an AI tool could do it in quite a lot faster, and it's tiny things that I don't want to spend a long time doing. And I think that is where AI is useful. The creative aspect of AI is oversimplified. Like you
Mm.
said, it oversimplifies complex subjects and complex topics, which sometimes there's a place for simplification, but most of the time just strips everything out of it and it becomes bland and repetitive and oversimplified and removes all the context, and you're just stuck with something that anyone can create.
So something that intrigues me is the decisions the developers have made with Notebook LM. The first obvious decision is it doesn't just read it out to you. It doesn't read out the transcript that it creates from your notes. If you put in bullet points and tables and some ideas, the generated conversation isn't just one person or one entity discussing their thing. It's a conversation. Now that was a choice. Why would be my question. Why is it a conversation with essentially two people that know exactly
I
what they're
wonder,
going to say?
I wonder if it's to do with reasoning. Like it's trying to create reasoning by creating two separate entities that are basically arguing with each other and discussing something with each other.
It's formatted as a conversational podcast, as two people going, "Oh, I saw this from X source, and this was like this. Oh, I don't understand. Please explain." And then they do explain. And it feels it feels more human than an AI robot reading out a script.
Yeah.
And something that I found interesting listening back, because what I've done with these AI conversations is I've generated them obviously from my script, and then I've listened to them back whilst pushing them up on you can find it on Spotify at the moment. I think it's Notebook coaching science notebook. And then at the start I'm like, yeah, this is me, but this is an AI constructed conversation because it's not me. um, and what I found is the analogies that it uses, the explanations that it tries to use, the added information it brings in. I would probably say it's like a 60-40, 60 being it's accurate, 40 being it's wrong. So it's more accurate than not.
Mm,
I feel like the more information I give it, the more likely that it will be accurate. But it still uses common language like mindset, hardwired, like those sorts of terms, which unless you're finicky about language, which ecological psychologists are, it wouldn't really matter. But I think because ecological psychologists are finicky about language because it adds particular assumptions, then that's where I think the frustrations are. If you were from a cog psych perspective, using Notebook LM, because it is mainstream psychology, most of what it's coming up with is probably pretty accurate.
mm.
So
That's what I have found is I've been trying to put my work with an ecological tint on there. It gets it very wrong and very quickly uses just common language. Just
interesting.
meh.
So, I mean, obviously you haven't listened to the podcast, but maybe ever listen to one of them like after this, because I'd be interested to get your perspective on it,
Mm.
because they, I say they, but it's an it, but it's not an it because it is a they because all of the data is all of the people. I don't know what to use. It's like they're stealing. It is stealing from they. Um, AI is it's accurate enough for those that are new to the topic, and that
Mm.
is where I feel I I don't know whether I want to have this clippable, but I like Notebook LM for that use case. Like for those people that are still embedded within traditional views, traditional cognitive
Yeah.
psychology, they're only sort of like dabbing into eco psych and want to understand roughly some of these ideas. I feel like a 10-minute Notebook LM podcast style conversation may help them go, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it like that. But as soon as you want to go a little bit deeper, that's where you're like, okay, now we need an actual person that's explaining these things because there are nuances here that the AI is overlooking.
That'd be interesting. That'd be interesting to look into.
So, but yeah, have you tried Notebook LM at all?
I haven't, no. All my stuff has been in ChatGPT's stuff because I have it.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense.
And the memory in ChatGPT is a pretty awesome thing. Like just from a case of like making it closer to what we would want it to be, I find ChatGPT's memory really good. Like that's helped. It is still oversimple. It still has the exact same problems as what you're sharing. You need to have a high level of expertise in your subject before you can even start using the tool. And I think that's the thing that, especially in the business world, people forget. Just in general, really, is that people forget that it's only as good as you are putting it in. Because
Mm,
if you don't have that expertise in your own topic or area and you're trying to create content in that topic and area, you're going to miss stuff. And then you're basically saying the same thing as 90% of the world.
I mean, I'm not a fan of the Dunning-Kruger effect and the false consensus effect as academic rigorous effects because the phenomenon can be explained or justified through statistical analysis and the rest of it. But for those that are familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, are you familiar, John?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought so. For those familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, I feel like that is emphasizing or having a huge impact on the way and the type people use AI. Because if you think you know more than you actually do, and then you start using AI to justify what it is that you know, potentially you could sink further into the hole of, oh yeah, I know all this, I know all this, but you don't know what you don't know, which is where I think those with higher levels of expertise get skeptical about
Mm.
what's used from AI because they don't know what they don't know, and some of the points that are raised are like, that's not, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah, there's some wild stuff it said in my use. I'm like, oh, what? No, 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 no. And then one thing is very true is that once it has an idea, it does not let go of that idea.
No, it doesn't. It does. I mean, it has used hardwired far more times than I would like. Like,
Mm.
did you know affordances are hardwired into us? What?
Mm.
No, they're not. Affordances are perceived. They are not hardwired.
Oh, that's painfully for me.
But if you're not familiar with the
Ah,
language, yeah, if you're not familiar with the
no.
language,
Oh, oh no, there's so many problems with that.
yep. But if you're not familiar with the
No.
language, it just happens.
Oh no, I don't like that. That makes me sad. Oh. Oh.
But when you take a step back and I think about what AI is doing, that is probably an assumption many people will have. And that
That's really useful.
exactly, and that's how I'm using Notebook LM
Mm.
at the moment. I'm not using Notebook LM as a tool for me for
Yes,
explaining the ideas.
it's what I've been using it for my own thing. As I'm building my own ideas up, that's what I've been using it for. Is to go, oh, that's how people will take that. Oh, okay, we need to look at that and 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 that piece and that piece and that piece. Well, that's the bunch of assumptions that are being made. Because that is something it has
Mm,
that is really valuable.
exactly.
Because it's
It's
a bunch of data about lots of people who are doing lots of things and have said lots of things. So taking the entirety of the internet and shoving it into a box. So you
mm,
have assumptions based across the board. Now, the information and data is biased towards a certain type. Yes, absolutely. But yes,
it still gives you biased assumptions, which you can then look and address. And this is something that I find, again, this is something with the overview at the moment, the audio overview that I find interesting. I don't understand where the minutes come from because I give it a source that if I was to read it out, it would take me about 5 minutes to read, and it gives me a 9 minute audio view. But then I give it a 15-minute video script, and it gives me an 8 minute audio view. And I'm like, okay, well, how does 5 minutes turn into 9, and how does 15 turn into 8? And then I gave it my 2 hour 15-minute video essay, and it turned it into 9 minutes. It gave me a 9 minute summary on over 2 hours worth of content, and it cherry picked a couple of studies, which I mean is fine. Gonna put 2 and a bit hours into 10 minutes. I'd expect a couple of studies, but it jumps from like the half-hour mark to the hour mark to the 2 and a bit hour mark, and I'm like, wow, okay, you've overlooked a lot of stuff, which you would expect with it being so short. But what I don't understand is I then gave it a script for about an 8 or 9 minute video, and it's 14 minutes. And I'm like, why you oversimplify one thing, but then you say lots on another thing? So I
Probably
feel,
because it was more focused.
but it wasn't. That's the thing. Like the 9 minute bit that turned into 14, it almost like it feels like it took three different points and made three mini audios and lumped them together.
Ah,
But what's interesting is with the podcast episodes that are up at the moment, I just copied the chapter. So the long video essay that I put in it through it like throughout 9 minute thing for, I just copied and pasted the text of the chapter and put it in. And now I have roughly 8-10 minute audios of it. So instead of just putting the whole video in, I've just put in the text of each chapter, and now I've got more explanations on in each section, which I feel is more accurate, but still, as I mentioned, still expresses all of the incorrect assumptions that individuals will have or likely will have if they're unfamiliar with the language that we use as ecological psychologists. So yeah, AI it's useful, but not in the ways that I feel people are using it for.
yeah, because it's being touted as this one thing fix all. It's just marketed. Well, bad marketing. Well, it's called it's marketing. It's bad marketing.
Ineffective marketing.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Ineffective marketing would
Yeah,
be
so
more.
I wouldn't say it's like bad is a comparative word.
Yeah,
Again,
true.
being
Ineffective marketing is being marketing ineffectively
yeah.
by people who want to make a lot of money from it because that's just how it works.
I'm going to challenge myself there because ineffective is also a comparative word because it's ineffective when compared to something else, but then bad is also compared to something else. So they're both the same thing. So would I be happy? Why am I not happy with the word bad? I think it's because it has a connotation which means something else is better, but then better and effective should be the same thing. So why don't I like bad? Doesn't feel accurate. This is me
So why
just
is ineffective more accurate then?
exactly. That's what I'm challenging.
Can something actually be accurate?
Yeah,
Because it's not
it can be
self-assembly,
more accurate.
which is
Something can
still
be more
incorrect.
accurate and something can be more effective, but something being more good doesn't feel right. And I've said
No,
right
I
deliberately
don't
there.
like more good. I don't like more good. More effective, whether that's just the grammatical
Yeah.
more, I'm not sure. It could be that.
Maybe that's grammatical constraints that we've grown up with using English, which is why we don't like it. It's funny. While we're challenging this is so Justin Sung posted a video a couple of weeks ago about becoming a learning machine or some tut that he called it. First 4 minutes says absolutely nothing. The next 4 minutes of the video is him basically saying that, hey, learning's important, you know, shit, Sherlock. Um, and then there's like 30 seconds of saying, this is what we did. which was essentially a reflection. Like, hey, get someone to have a look at what it is that they do and see if it's effective or not. Okay, great. So they did a 14-minute video on if you're reflective, it can be helpful. Cool. But they don't go into detail on how to be reflective apart from saying, I know what this is, or I don't know what this is, or I've thought about this before, or I haven't thought about this before. Great. Really useful. Not. Uh,
So
so
is that bad then?
well, I would describe that as an ineffective video. And I think most people would say that that's bad. And reflecting on it, I don't like describing the video as bad because it can be useful to some people that haven't been exposed to a lot of the ideas before. But I think if it's going to be directed at educators, I guess it's the mismatch of the target audience with the the expertise actually required to make it effective.
So next question on that, because there's an assumption there that Justin does not have the expertise.
No, no, no. It's not Justin doesn't have the expertise. It's the expertise of the content that would
Mm.
be required, or the lack of expertise, to be more accurate, required for the video to be effective doesn't match the target audience that I feel the video is
Which
pointed
is I
at.
think a problem with so much of content, which is why what we do is so interesting. Well, what I think what we do is so interesting because we're not creating content. We could market this far better,
Hmm.
far more effectively, but it would dumb down everything that we're saying.
I'm not so sure about. Yeah, we could market this more effectively, yes, but I think that that's where like the target audience would shift. Like,
Mm.
if we want this to be more effective in using effective as a measurable metric, say views or watch time or something like that, then we would need to constrain, and adding constraints will inherently adjust the complexity of the conversation and the dynamics of the conversation because that's what constraints do. Adding those constraints may simplify the conversation. And if it simplifies the conversation, well, now it's not as explorative. It's not exploratory. Um,
We ain't explorers anymore.
yeah, we don't explore as much.
Dora.
Yeah, no. Um, so yeah, so it's not it's not easier, it's not simpler, but it could be.
No,
And the target audience, I feel, as the views go up, would have to be less experienced and
which
have
I
lower
think
levels of
is the
expertise.
point. Because if you
Yeah.
fix it, if we look at this from like outside of the learning place, we're looking at it from a business perspective. It is more effective if the idea is views and subscribers and revenue. The broader you go on YouTube, the more appealing you'll be because YouTube wants people to come on this on the platform and do all of the things and say all of the things that they want you to say so that you stay on that platform because watch time is watch time is watch time is watch time. Keep them on YouTube. And so it needs to be way broader than stuff like what we do, where it's nowhere near.
Yeah. Our uh, our target audience isn't exactly in the hundreds of thousands. What
It might just make 100 if we're lucky.
yes. Um the so the thing that I was well, the thing that I was thinking about when we were talking about this is a tweet that I saw recently from Jay Alto, who is a YouTube strategist, discussionist, theorist, whatever you want to call them. And they work with larger creators, and they were saying that if use is your goal on YouTube, then your target audience will become 10-year-old boys. Like, if the more views you want, like that is where your target audience will end up at, because there are more, according to YouTube metrics anyway, there are more young boys watching YouTube than any other demographic, because young individuals watch YouTube, and according to the YouTube analytics, there's more boys than girls on YouTube. Whether that's accurate or not, we don't know, because that's the data that YouTube give us. So the more views you want, the younger and more masculine the content will lean. That is what the YouTube data is suggesting. Whether that's
Which
accurate,
if you look at Beast,
yep. When you look at the bigger creators that are getting the loads of views, it is explosions, fast, very shallow, very.
minutely reductionist, to be fair, we are being, but it's also fairly accurate.
I mean, some of his newer videos have less explosions, but the explosions aren't as literal. They're emotional
No,
explosions.
they are now just, I'm going to punch you in the gut with emotion. And you can actually, it's really funny watching one of his videos because I just find them fascinating from a creator standpoint. Because I'm watching it being created. I'm like, cool. Now you're going to hit me in the gut with some emotion. Oh, there it is. And you can start to see the patterns that are emerging. It's like, okay, cool. We're gonna get to a point now where like you're gonna excite me with something really like, oh, and you won't have any idea. Okay, that's the retention thing. Let's see where that comes in. And then later on, it's just this tiny slither of stuff, and then you have a big gut punch of emotion where the contestants are really banding together, and then you have the bad person. And I'm just like, this is so fascinating.
What's interesting to me as a reflective practitioner is the storylines that you get in
Mm,
non-fiction books. You know roughly what's going to happen, but what makes the books interesting? Like you take a Lord of the Rings or a Harry Potter, you know that the good people are going to win, and you know that they're going to struggle along the way, but the story is still interesting. What I find with a lot of the user-generated content online is I know what the ending's going to be, but the story isn't exciting.
yeah.
The exciting stories are the ones that add in complexity, but also honest reflection. Like, one of the guys that I've been watching recently, Preston, I can't remember the last bit of his YouTube channel name. He's an older guy, but he just randomly adds in these auto-tuned songs that sort of like they're just words that he sings to and puts some autotune over the top and adds some weird like instruments to it. And he's sort of just singing about anything. And you have no idea when it's going to appear. You know it's going to appear somewhere in the video. And it's
I
just,
know who that is. I think I've seen them before.
yeah, I mean, they're sort of like 100,000 view sort of club. And I know what the end of the video is going to be because they say it in the thumbnail and the title, but it's still an interesting story to watch. And it's because of the unexpected dynamics of the story. And going back to the effective or bad, I feel like the story that Justin was sharing in the video was obvious, but there was nothing unexpected. There was no dynamics in there. There was no real complexity in there. It was exactly what it said on the tin. But, and I think this is why potentially it was bad, the title and the thumbnail
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
didn't,
whoa, 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 whoa. You just said bad.
yeah, because that's what we were talking about.
Okay.
Because we were talking about bad or ineffective.
Mm.
This is why I think it could be bad rather than ineffective, or the other way around, whichever, is that it didn't match. Like the title and the thumbnail didn't match or didn't explain the story, but neither did the first 8 minutes of the video. So the first
Mm.
8 minutes of the video was ineffective. And could I say that that was bad? Well, yes. So I prefer it's at me saying it's ineffective because it was. It doesn't match, like the task doesn't match the problem, sorry, doesn't match the desired learning outcome. Like the problem that he has set, well,
Mm.
he didn't really set a problem, but the
I was gonna
problem that
say,
the problem that he described that he assumed other people had and the solution that he was giving didn't match the learning outcome that he was trying to give. So this is me trying to explain a cog psych learning lesson, like an instructional lesson from an ecological perspective, which is very difficult. So traditionally, he told you you have a problem, and he gave you the solution, but he didn't actually confirm that you had that problem, and he didn't confirm that the solution was the one that you needed, and he didn't really explain how you do the solution, which is why I feel it was ineffective. And I could describe that as bad. The reason I'm choosing to describe it as ineffective is because ecologically, when I describe it, the practice design is ineffective. But it doesn't mean that it was wrong, because people could still learn from it. And I feel like I have this assumption that bad is where you can't have learning from it. That's my internal meaning behind the word bad.
Is it possible to have something where you can't learn anything?
Not learn. You're always learning, because obviously every experience is unique. So when we assume that there is no learning, I don't think I don't mean that literally. I mean
Okay.
that is, but I recognize like that is one of the challenges with the ecological approach when we're talking about these things, because there are assumptions with the meanings in which we're using them, because the relationship is between us,
Yeah.
obviously. So for this context, I would say the no learning is there is nothing significant that was added to the context which helped the individual develop their skills.
How how would you recreate that then? Because then you've got to ask how much additional context to add. Because I think this is for me where I've got caught.
What do you mean?
Well, in the past, and sometimes even now with what I'm doing, when we focus on an ecological approach, a number find it hard, will still bring those assumptions. And so it's about, does that make that bad or ineffective?
See, I would describe that as ineffective because they're still exploring. Like, if they're exploring
So would you say that the ecological approach is only, it can only work when people want to explore it?
No, because you can't not want to explore something if you're behaving in that way. Like, if you are behaving in a way with an intention towards something new or towards something different, then you're using the ecological approach. Whether you like it or not, that is how we would describe that interaction.
Yeah.
If you're doing this, or you're trying to do the same thing over and over, you could still describe the experience from an ecological perspective, because you can describe any experience through either perspective. But the purpose from the educator creating the practice design is where it becomes more or less effective when we describe it through an ecological lens. Because if you describe something through a cognitive lens, like this is why I think effective maybe is more useful in this, is that the video can be effective if described through a cognitive approach, because you're giving them the answer to the problem that they potentially have.
Yeah, I see.
So it's not bad.
So if the practice design is through CogPsych, then it's fine. Because this is
If the purpose,
yeah, if the purpose of it is a CogPsych view, so then it isn't actually ineffective, it's effective.
yeah, it's potentially effective, assuming that they get the metrics that they want. Yes. Yeah, maybe that's why I prefer effective, because depending on the approach that you take, it would be more or less ineffective. But still, that makes it somewhat redundant, because bad is the same.
Yeah,
It's more or less good.
yeah. Interestingly, you used more or less good. You just didn't use bad.
Yeah. I think that's my leniency towards positivity rather than negativity.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. I lean more positive than negative, but again, that's a glass half full or empty.
Mm.
Like, I think they're both as as long as the communication is effective in getting across the ideas to the other individual, it doesn't really matter the words at which you use.
Yeah.
So I feel like at this point, bad and effective or good and effective could both be used. Because ineffective and effective are essentially the same word. Like symbolically, they are the same word, except there's two letters added in the front of it. Whereas good and bad are individual words. Like,
Yeah.
unless you understood the meaning behind those two individual words, you wouldn't put them together. Like someone
Mm.
learning English for the first time wouldn't recognize that good and bad are related. Whereas you could see that ineffective and effective are related. Like when I
Mm.
learn a foreign language, I recognize that some words have an S on the end or
Mm.
an IN at the start or a UN at the start. I recognize
Mm.
that, okay, they must be related in some way because they are very similar. That may be an incorrect assumption, but it's more right than wrong most of the time. So again, I feel like this is a linguistic conversation which there's no, again, ecologically speaking, there's no right or wrong answer because it's going to depend on the relationship between the organism and environment and the context that it's being used in, whether there are multiple organisms within that system or not.
Yeah.
I feel like I will still lean towards effective and ineffective over bad and good.
Yeah. Cool.
But maybe I shouldn't. And this, I guess, relates to what I was talking about in the summit, BASB summit. Um,
Mm.
I spoke with people about sharing ideas through ecological dynamics. Um, and they were saying that you need to experiment with discussing these ideas with individuals less familiar with the philosophy. Because
Okay.
because at the end of the day, the ideas need to be applicable. If they're not applicable, then they're just abstract words that are not useless, but not as effective or as good as other ideas. Yeah, I'm trying to get comfortable with using good now, like during this conversation, and because it's different, it feels uncomfortable.
Mm.
Yeah, the good ideas. Yeah, maybe that's where I'm at a maybe that's the point I'm at now. I need to adjust the language that I use to be more shallow, but it's not more shallow
Yeah. It
because
doesn't feel shallow.
it feels
'Cause
shallow to
you,
me
but it also is the same thing.
because meanings are in people, not words.
Mm.
So the word bad for me has a different meaning to ineffective, but that's my meaning. And if I reduce my meaning from the relationship between the word and myself and interpret, not literally interpret with mental representations, but interpret the word as just those symbols, then the word meaning to other people may have the same meaning as ineffective to me, which suggests I need to readdress the language at which that I use to explain the information because meanings are in people, not words. So I could, instead of using alternative words, use the same words but
But with it,
re-emphasize the meaning.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
So,
Yeah.
hardwired.
See, hardwired, the meaning of hardwired, I don't feel like you could readjust because it is so heavily ingrained in the assumptions that people make from CogPsych, which are bad.
What if it was a feeling?
See what I did there? See what I did there? The
Yeah, I did that.
bad.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. But if we're talking from experience,
Mm,
for some, things feel hardwired. They
mm,
feel out of control, which is kind of when I look at the word hardwired, it's something that is autonomous. It just happens.
hmm. And that would be the description
Mm,
of the symbolic word, hardwired. The description would be it was there to start with, it's autonomous, you can't get rid of it, it was ingrained, it was embedded,
mm,
all of those
mm.
other words that you would use to reinforce that. That's why I don't think you could change the meaning of hardwired as a term because it is so ingrained. Because
True. I suppose
bad.
you could use embedded, which
Yeah,
would
but like I said
kind
right
of,
at the start, bad is a comparative word. Ineffective is a comparative word. There needs to be other context added to the word
whereas
to,
hardwired is not comparative.
well, no, how would you compare like that's more hardwired to that thing? It's not that's bad or that's worse than that thing because like the
Well,
because bit.
there is a comparison there, though, isn't there? Because if
Yeah, but
you are
what
either hard,
are
you
you
are either
more
hard.
hardwired than me?
No,
Would you say you are more hardwired than me?
no.
But I could say you are more ineffective, or you are bad, or you are worse when compared
Mm.
to me at blah blah blah.
But is that not an essence of just the language we're used to? Like, if we're talking about hardwired, we're more talking about behaviors. This behavior is more hardwired.
That's assumption.
Yep, but that is a common assumption.
No, it's not. And that's what's interesting. From your experience, yes, because I imagine like I'm imagining the experiences that you're having with that term, but my
Mm.
experiences with that term, hardwired, isn't behaviors,
Interesting.
it's it's representations and thoughts, which could manifest as behaviors, but representations and thoughts are hardwired because they're intuitive. They're hardwired in your brain. They're neurons that,
Oh, I see.
yeah. So it's hardwired neurons or hardwired habits, but the
Hmm.
habits could
But
be,
so habits are from if I'm understanding you correctly, habits are thoughts which can turn into behaviors.
again, it depends on the conversation. The person that I'm talking to could have habits as the behaviors they're doing, or could have habits as the motor programs they have stored in their head. Because
Mm.
again, they're thinking cog psych, I have a motor program stored in my head, which is what the habit is, and that is hardwired. My behavior is hardwired because of the mental representation I have in my head. Hardwired, assumed from cognitive psychology, which I, from an ecological psychology perspective, wouldn't say we are hardwired because we
No,
don't have things hardwired in our brain
no,
using that meaning.
no, we don't. I agree.
If we were to reconceptualize hardwired as um well, as an attractor, then yes. But shifting the meaning of hardwired
So
to
when so
attractor,
that's quite a long stretch. That's quite
yeah.
a hard. That's some jungle gym shit.
Yeah, that's some like Olympic
When
gymnastics going on.
yeah. So so
How do we do that?
how
Good question.
yeah, but not even that. But like, where's the line? Because there's now a line.
Hmm.
Well, there is to go from hardwired to um whatever we just said.
Attractor.
Attractor, thank you. From hardwired to attractor is a massive kind of jump. Although, so would you say that those are kind of the same thing?
You're speaking cogpsych. Jump from one to another.
It-
Fractals?
yeah, but I also think you're speaking fractals. I'm
No,
hearing
I know
fractals.
I'm speaking fractals, but for you
Mm,
to say there's a line means that there is one and another. But meanings are in people, not words. So
yes.
there isn't a hardwired. There are lots of different meanings of hardwired, which
Mm.
will blur into attractors the further away from traditional cog-site explanations are used. So there isn't a line and there's not a jump because it's the process of explanation. You're
But
picking a
bad.
fractal to add a line in there.
Mm, but bad and good, and then you've got effective and ineffective. It sounds like the same thing.
But bad and good, yeah, they're two completely different words. And as I mentioned in another language, if you have a look at those words, there is no way that you would say that they are related unless you have meaning behind them.
Ah, so the difference is with hardwired and
Like
attract.
the
They are
symbols,
related.
yeah, the symbols.
Symbols are relational, I
Forget
think.
all meaning, and you just look
Yeah.
at the symbols. Bad and good, there's no relation. Effective and ineffective, there is a relation because the symbols look the same.
And so what you're saying there is that hardwired and an attractor, which they are they're just two. It sounds almost like they're similar sides of a similar coin. They're the same thing, just
They can have similar meanings depending on the explanations people give to them.
mm,
But again,
cool.
this is language. Like the hardwired symbolically has almost no similarity to a tractor, but the meaning
Mm.
the
And the
people
meaning
put on the
behind it
words
does
can
or
do.
can do.
Can do. If hardwired, and if someone's meaning of hardwired is mental representations with motor programs, then that meaning has almost no similarity to an attractor.
Mm.
If the meaning of hardwired leans towards, oh, well, you're just naturally doing that behavior, it leans more towards an attractor. If the
Mm.
hardwired is, oh, you're more likely to do that behavior than that behavior, well, now that's more like an attractor. But saying that, oh, you're hardwired to do it because you're more likely to do this because of the affordances you're perceiving or the opportunities you're perceiving in this environment are different to the ones you used in that environment, well, now it's even closer to an attractor.
Mm. I
But
see. Yeah.
those meanings aren't often used as explanations for hardwired. You would need someone really that has a meaning closer from eco-psych that would traditionally use an attractor as the word to explain rather than
Yeah.
hardwired.
For most, it would not be an attractor would not be anywhere near it. Although, kind of what you were saying there, all of the other things would be how I would represent hardwired. But then I must also remember that I can see attractors. I also know that phrase. But in the conversations I have with people when they say they're hardwired, I ask what that means to them. Like what do you mean when you say hardwired? It often edges, if we're looking at it like a line and linearly, which is not accurate at all, it edges
It's
on the side.
reductionist, but it's helpful
Yeah,
for conversation.
yeah, but it edges towards a tractor. They just don't have that language.
You think it edges towards attractor
Yeah, that's true. Yes, that is my perception. Yes,
because unless they've been exposed to the word attractor or the explanations that are similar to attractor,
that's
they
true.
won't think that that meaning is there.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they're moving forwards through a tunnel, but for them it's white at the end. For you, it's a completely different color. Like,
Yes.
can you see the light at the end of the tunnel? What light?
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. I like that. That's cool.
so, but yeah, and these sorts of conversations about language, they're what I'm trying to explore a bit more with the conversations with people that are less familiar with EcoPsych, and is what Notebook LM is actually helping me explore because it's using assumptions, words, and terms, and I'm like, no, but if I was to do some mental gymnastics, I don't like that term, but I'm using it because I feel like people relate to it. If I was to do some mental gymnastics, I could make this related to ecopsych and use ecopsych explanations.
Mm.
And I feel like the biggest barrier at the moment to ecopsych and ecological dynamics is the new language. Because
Yes.
new words is fun for some people. Some people really like new words. Other people go, oh my God, affordances, attractors, bifurcations, constraints. Why do I need all these new words? And the meaning is in people, not words. Constraints. Both approaches use constraints because you can't not use constraints. But the meaning of constraints shifts. And that's what I don't know whether you've seen in my recent videos on the Danny Hatcher channel. That's what I've emphasized. I've emphasized the meaning behind the words,
Mm.
not the difference in language.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether that's helpful or not as a
It's
context for
interesting.
you, but
This is interesting.
yeah, I'm certainly learning from the AI podcast. That's what I'm going to call it, my AI podcast. It's easier than saying Notebook LM. AI podcast.
Danai.
That's how my name would have been spelt if I was born female, like traditional female. It would have been Danni, not Y. So my name was going to be Danny either way.
Danai. Danai?
Yeah, maybe Danny.
Danai. Danai!
Well, yeah, I've only got one eye, correct.
Same.
But yeah, so I think that was a good AI conversation with some language put in there as well.
Of course.
Anything else you wanna add on, or do you reckon we could round it up
Pretty
there?
good. Pretty good. Pretty done.
Yeah. Now I just need to get AI to summarize this.
Good luck.
I feel like that could be an interesting point though. Hey,
It will be.
Notebook LM, summarize this conversation, and let's see how much you get accurate or not, or good or bad. I'm gonna start using good and bad. Ugh. Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Yes. Right. See you all next week.